yeah, lovely.
Okay. Okay, Danny.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's staff brief.
Morning, everyone. I'm Paul Robinson. I'm the Chief Executive here at Sherwood, and joining me on today's staff brief is Ali Pearson, our Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Lead, and we're going to talk about the artwork that's been unveiled this week and the anti-racism strategy. But just before we move to Ali, I just want to touch on the fact that we've been incredibly busy this week in our hospitals, and thank you to all who've contributed to keeping patients safe and well. We have been busy. We've been on Opal 4 much of the week, stepped down to Opal 3 today, and that means there's been some crowding in our emergency department, and we've had limited bed capacity. But as always, I'm always incredibly humbled by the fact that we have kept patients safe and well, and I've been a little bit closer to it this week. So I've been gold on call for a couple of nights on Monday and Tuesday, so I have taken part in those bed meetings. Thank you to all those working really hard overnight as well. Just a note about COVID. So I guess we're all now aware that COVID is on the increase again. There's increased transmissions in the community, and that's across all age ranges. There's more patients in our hospitals with COVID than we had a couple of weeks ago. In fact, that's round about doubled. There are 66 patients who are COVID positive as of today. And of course, that's affecting our workforce availability and staff absences. And when it's coupled with this time of year, when we're approaching the end of the annual leave year and people are taking hard-earned annual leave, then that does cause some service disruption. The fact that COVID is on the increase just reminds us all to remain vigilant, following the IPC guidance, and if you have symptoms, then not coming to work, staying off site, regular testing in place. So really remain vigilant, please. Face mask being worn, good hand hygiene, and following that IPC guidance. Thank you. Okay, so Ali, let's talk about the One World artwork that was unveiled this week. So you and I were part of that. I was extremely excited. So over to you.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, it was a really exciting day on Monday. So it was the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, and the artwork is really part of our anti-racism strategy, which I will come on to as well. And I do want to encourage everybody who's in attendance to ask any questions about the strategy. And I'm happy to answer any questions at all based on that. But this artwork, it was a really exciting reveal. And I just thought I'd share with colleagues how we came to have this artwork and where the inspiration for it came from. So for a while now, in the post of EDI lead, I've wanted to be able to celebrate the diversity within our workforce, and I think it's fair to say that as an organisation, we speak a lot about how proud we are of the diversity in our workforce. So for me, it was about how can we celebrate that and how can we showcase it, in addition to the positive feelings that we speak about. So the why came from that, in terms of being able to showcase and really celebrate the diversity within the trust. And then as the anti-racism strategy was developed, it became more important to me to have a visual representation of diversity in our trust. And I've got it behind me, so this is the artwork, although I do appreciate I'm blocking quite a bit of it, so my apologies. But anyone that wants to see the artwork, the permanent installation is by the lifts opposite the Faith Centre, so where the COVID wall is. If you turn around and look to your left, that's the wall that's got this fabulous artwork on. We've also got a banner at the entrance to Kingsmill Hospital, and we have some artwork which we'll be delivering to Mansfield Community Hospital and Newark Hospital in the coming weeks as well. But yes, so this became an action within our anti-racism strategy, and during the development of that strategy, I felt it was really important as a trust that we were very brave and bold in our statement that we will not tolerate or accept racism in our trust, and we have posters that were designed for that purpose, which are you know, very plain and simple and to the point in terms of what that poster says. So to enhance the anti-racism message, this artwork is a form of celebration, but it also acts as a bit of an unconscious I guess prompt for anybody who visits our hospitals that we are a very, very diverse team, and far more diverse than our local community. So the message there is that we have colleagues from all around the globe who are working together to deliver outstanding care in our hospitals. So I'm hopeful that the combination of being very clear about our position on racism within the trust, coupled with the celebratory artwork that showcases the diversity within our trust, will help. Those two elements together will help to reduce or minimise the instances of racial abuse that colleagues are subjected to. I also just want to remind those colleagues that are on the call today that the flags that are represented are actually the countries of birth of our colleagues. So when we were thinking about this artwork, I had a look at our ESR data to establish nationalities of colleagues. And in actual fact, when I reviewed the data, there are far more countries of birth that represent the diversity within our organisation than there are nationalities. So I felt in order to have the biggest, boldest diversity statement possible, the best way for us to go would be to identify the countries of birth of our colleagues and have those represented by those countries' flags. And the data was taken at a point in time as well. It's important to note that. I realised today that when I did an interview for our new recruitment website, I talked about diversity, and at that time, which was summer-ish time last year, I think it was around July or August time, there were colleagues from 79 countries. Fast forward to December, when I started to really look at putting this artwork together, we had 88. So it's quite possible that even in the last couple of months, we may have had colleagues join us from countries that aren't represented on the artwork. And that's because we took that data at a point in time. So as at December 2021, we had 88 countries, and they are all here in the artwork. So if your country is not on the artwork currently, it's not because we don't care and we don't want to represent your country. It's because we had to take the data at a point in time. So yeah, I hope everybody likes it. I've had some really positive feedback, and there's been some lovely reactions in the Team SFH Facebook group, where Charlotte kindly shared the photographs that were taken on Monday. So there's been some fabulous reactions and some lovely comments as well. So very grateful to everybody for getting involved. And we would ask colleagues as well to, if you're passing the wall, or if you want to take a trip to the wall in a break, we're encouraging everybody to go to the wall and take a selfie, or if you've got a colleague with you, to take a picture of you pointing to where in the world your birth country is, and then do share that with us on the Team SFH Facebook page, so we can start to really see colleagues from all these fabulous countries from around the world.
Yeah, thanks, Ali. So I was part of that unveiling it. I was so proud and to celebrate the diversity of our workforce, and as you say, it represents the birth country of all our staff at a point in time. I know you were really specific there, but what it showed me was we're one team at Sherwood Forest, and we're representative of 88 countries from around the globe. But we are one team. We bring all that diversity and our knowledge and experience and our backgrounds all together to work as a team to create great patient care for our community. So really proud to represent the trust and to be able to unveil this. And I was gonna prompt you on there. Take a selfie. Urge everybody to take a look at the artwork and to go and find their home birth flag and get a photograph of that. Another question I asked. Oh yeah, that was around Newark and Mansfield. So the same artwork will be also placed at Newark and Mansfield shortly. We have a couple of we certainly it's not a question. It's someone who's left a comment in the chat, which is that they love the artwork. A great way to show the diversity within our trust.
Oh.
So that's exactly what it is. So the artwork is fantastic. I like the message behind it. Does the wall state this is the Sherwood Forest workforce countries of birth? It doesn't quite state that, but that we're making that clear that we are attempting to represent the home birth country of every member of staff on our workforce. Charlotte has posted in the chat around where people can find the No Place for Racism strategy. So are we moving on to that topic, Ali? Do you want to talk about that strategy? Okay, let's go for it.
Thank you, Paul. So yeah, it's just a reminder for colleagues really that during UK Race Equality Week in February, we did launch our anti-racism strategy in the Trust, and that is available on our website. So we have published that publicly, which is easy for me to say. So that's available on the website, on Sherwood Forest Hospital website. So if anybody wants to have a look at that, it has got a strategic outline, but within that as well, you will see that it's very action focused. So there are actions within that strategy that we have committed to taking as a trust, one of which was the unveiling of artwork that showcases the diversity within our organisation, so we can certainly mark that one as completed. So the anti-racism strategy, I've done a couple of walkabouts since the launch of the strategy, and I haven't seen many of the posters in departments and areas. So just to kind of remind everybody, and if you can pass this on to your department leaders and managers, a poster will have been placed in all pigeonholes for all departments, and what we'd like to see, if it's at all possible, is those displayed in very public areas in wards and departments, particularly those that are clinical, where patients and members of the public or carers will be in attendance, because the message in the poster is really for everybody, that racism is not acceptable in the trust. But there are two very important messages for members of the public that I think they need to see, and our patients need to see, which is that racism is a hate crime and we will involve the police, and also that we will refuse to treat. And in the walkabouts that I've done, these have been two of the areas that colleagues have been less aware of. So it's just to remind colleagues that we have the Trust's violence and aggression at work policy, and the policy is very clear that in the event of a physical assault of any kind, obviously the police should be informed and notified. But where there is a verbal assault against a colleague that relates to or is driven by racism, homophobia or religious hate, those instances should be reported to the police. And the policy has a flow chart that enables you to understand how that procedure should be enacted. We'd also encourage colleagues to let security know if there's a incident of racism, because what we will do is use our yellow card scheme to send warnings to patients, members of the public, etc., who racially assault our colleagues. So it's really important that we're reporting to the police, we're contacting security so that the warning letters can be issued or the yellow card can be issued. And also we would ask colleagues to record all such incidents on Datix. There isn't a drop-down menu from what I gather on Datix to indicate that an incident was race related, but what we would ask colleagues to do is to make sure that that's noted in the comments of a Datix report, so that we're able to monitor the assaults that are racially motivated towards colleagues. And then in time, we hope that encouraging colleagues to be more specific in the comments will enable us to see what is happening now. And then as the campaign continues and as we continue our work with anti-racism, we hope to see a reduction in the number of Datix reports that are made where racism has been the driving factor for an incident. And then the refusal of care. This is something that colleagues, some colleagues have been quite shocked by, but have really appreciated. So I really want all colleagues to know that the anti-racism strategy has now empowered colleagues to refuse to treat a patient. So we're aware that that could cause some operational difficulties, but it is something that the Trust has committed to at senior level, senior leadership level, to empower colleagues to make that decision. If they are subjected to racial abuse, they can refuse to treat a patient. Now, as a Trust, we can also issue a red card to a patient, and again, the details of that are in the violence and aggression at work policy. But I think the key thing to be mindful of with the red card is that it would be an absolute last resort, because it's actually quite difficult once we've placed a red card on somebody to then police their activity within our Trust, because of the various different clinical systems, some of which don't talk to each other. So it might not be known that someone has been banned from our sites, and we haven't actually ever done that, so it would be a last resort. So what we're wanting to do is to say to colleagues, if you are racially abused, follow the violence at work and aggression policy if it feels comfortable for you to do so. So challenge that behaviour yourself, or if there is someone working with you, work together to challenge that behaviour through talking to the patient. So that is one way that you might deal with a racist incident. However, if you feel that you are uncomfortable or you feel unsafe continuing to care for that patient, you are empowered to say that you will refuse to treat that patient. So it's really important that colleagues know that that is an option that's available to them. So in the event that happens, you'd obviously need to speak to your line manager or a senior colleague in charge to let them know that you've been subjected to a racial assault and that you don't feel comfortable in continuing the treatment of that patient. We would recommend that a note is placed in the patient's notes to say that treatment was refused due to racial abuse. And again, the Datix record, contacting the police and making sure that security are aware of that. And we know that in some cases that may result in delays to patient care, but we've accepted that that is a thing that if it happens, that delay is due to the patient's behaviour rather than a failing of our colleagues and our Trust to deliver that outstanding care. I'm happy to take any questions on that, because I know it's probably a new approach. So I'll take a breath.
Yeah, thanks, Ali. So I was going to come in there and just reiterate, you know, that this is was a really important moment when we launched this strategy. So the word strategy it's not just a document which states an intent, although it is a document that states intent, but it also gives those practical options and actions that people can take if they've been subjected to discrimination of this nature, and it really then empowers. Hopefully, it's empowering to staff who do suffer that racial discrimination or unfortunate issues of that nature, that they know that they've got the trust and the senior leadership backing, and have some tangible and actions that they can take in the way that Ali's just described, escalation, reporting, and ultimately a refusal to treat if that's appropriate. So it's really important that people understand that, and that's why I think it's such an important document and strategy that we have at the trust. Okay, just looking at any questions that may have come in for you on this topic, or indeed on the artwork. There's a couple I'll cover off on other topics. Just a comment from Marcus, who's our comms lead. So important to report and encourage colleagues to report all racism incidents so the trust knows about them and can take action and offer support. So it's a good point that Marcus make there. Encourage all colleagues to support. So we're not just reliant on one individual who may have suffered discrimination to take all the action. You know, we're supporting you to do that. We want all colleagues to support everyone here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would add to that as well. And thank you for the comment, Marcus. It's absolutely a very valid point that you make. And what I'm hoping to do, or what I will be doing in the coming weeks, is introducing some training sessions and some drop-in sessions, some of which, you know, we'll do a bit of a poll probably on the Team SFH Facebook group to ascertain what method is best for colleagues. But we want to engage with colleagues around what to look out for, because sometimes racism takes form in very, very subtle ways. So we want to enable colleagues to understand what it might look like and how to act upon that when it happens as well. So we're looking for everybody really to commit to the anti-racism strategy to support colleagues who may be at risk of harm because of their background. And one of the things that we're looking at as well is I've had some conversations with Nottinghamshire Police around community and also supporting work, and what they've helped me with is some resources around hate crime. So I'll be able to put some training together that's very specific around hate crime, what that looks like, how to report it. And it's really important to say that in my conversations with Nottinghamshire Police, I have expressed that as one of the largest employers in the area, we really welcome their support, particularly with incidents that we report through work. But I've also highlighted to them that we are aware of racial abuse that's been directed at colleagues in our community. Specifically, I'm aware that we've had some racial abuse directed at colleagues who have joined us from around the globe and have visited the local town centre in Mansfield and have been subjected to racial assault in the community. So I've asked for the police to provide some support in terms of how we can engage with colleagues who have travelled from overseas to join us in how to respond and how to report such instances, because I'm acutely aware that it's not just happening within our hospitals. Racism is in our communities, and that's a sad reality, but we want to ensure that colleagues are supported in the community as well as at work. I think it's important to highlight as well that there may be instances of racism and discriminatory behaviour that come from other colleagues. And certainly we would encourage anybody to speak to the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian or champions if that happens to you, as they are really well placed to signpost you for support in terms of your well-being, but also the HR support that is available in the organisation if there is any colleague-to-colleague abuse. And I think that's fair to say those systems are in place across the board. And one of my hopes with the anti-racism strategy is that as we reinforce the message that racism is not acceptable, that will also have an effect on homophobia, religious hate, misogyny, etc., so that abuse is minimised across the trust, because it's not acceptable in any forms for any colleagues to come into work and be abused. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Yeah, absolutely not. It's not. We cannot tolerate, and we will not tolerate that behaviour. I've got a couple of questions that have come in for you, Ali. This one, just to make sure I've got the right context. Apologies if this is a silly question, but does the anti-racism strategy cover non-ethnic minority staff? For example, unfair treatment of a staff member because they are not from an ethnic minority. Is this classed as racial or discrimination? Again, sorry for not understanding.
Okay, so thank you for the question, and no question is a silly question, and there's no need to apologise. So the anti-racism strategy covers all forms of racism. So I think it's very important to be very clear that racism is not just about colour. So this is not a white and black issue, for example. So there can be racism towards people from a white background whose cultural heritage is different. So, for example, colleagues who may have travelled from European countries to work at the Trust, or those who have an African background but are white. And also we need to be mindful of cultural racism, because some cultures traditionally wouldn't get on, but obviously are coming together in the work environment. I think we have to be clear as well that the Equality Act protects people with particular protected characteristics. So while we have a focus on racism, we don't expect any colleague to be subjected to any forms of discrimination, but there are some particular protected characteristics that would apply. So it's not a silly question, but it's not an easy one, sorry, for me to answer, because it would very much, I suppose, depend on the circumstances that somebody who is perhaps from a white background feels that they've been discriminated against because they're not from an ethnic minority background. As he paused, just
so we've got another, it's a comment, but I think it absolutely encapsulate what your answer there, so I'll read it out. I feel it is also worthwhile remembering that staff come from closer to home and include different home nations, so Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and not just England. I have experienced racism at work as I have a Scottish accent and have been told to speak English.
Wow. And this is exactly what this strategy is aiming to minimise circumstances of. And I'm really sorry that that person's had that experience. But we have to be mindful, and you're absolutely right, that England itself, England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, but also in England, there are so many regional accents. There are regional localisms that people use that somebody from say north of England would not have a clue what we're talking about, because it's something that's very Mansfield or very Nottinghamshire, and obviously there are a broad range of accents within the United Kingdom. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you that accents can be a real barrier in communication, and even people who are born British in the United Kingdom may have an accent, and people can be quite rude about that if they are struggling to understand. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's across the board. You know, we need to be mindful that diversity is not, and I hope this has been made really clear in the strategy and in the work that I do, that diversity is not just about colour and white people. It's about far more than that. But particularly with regards to racism, I think we have to be clear that the likelihood of racism is greater for those who are people of colour, because their difference is immediately obvious. Whereas someone who is white but perhaps European, they may be subjected to racism once they've spoken. So they might not have a racist slur, for example, when they immediately meet somebody, but somebody may have something negative to say when they speak, if they speak with a strong accent. So it's a very complex, emotive subject. I'd be really interested to have a conversation with our colleague who raised the point about the question around being discriminated against because you're not from an ethnic minority. So if you felt comfortable to get in touch with me, I'd be really interested to understand more about that, because I think there are individual circumstances that may sometimes apply, and we need to understand what's happened there, because obviously the trust is you know, we work hard to ensure that no colleagues are discriminated against, but we have to acknowledge that those from marginalised communities are more likely to face discrimination because of their difference, and that's what we really have to focus on ensuring that we're putting measures in place to prevent that.
Yeah, thank you, Ali. Yeah, that really helps me as well, because I think that speaks to the inclusion word in the role. So we want everyone to be included and celebrate the diversity of everyone and everyone, how they bring those experiences and knowledge to work here and contribute here at Sherwood. So yeah, encourage anyone who's more curious about this, because you're raising lots of awareness, I think, today, Alice, which is great, and people to get in touch with you if they want to understand more. I got one more question for you, and how did the strategy come about?
Oh, that's a really good question. So race equality and race inclusion is something that's been quite prominent in the agenda within the NHS for some time now. And I think in 2020, the death of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, along with the very clear disproportionate impact of COVID on Black and minority ethnic communities, brought race equality as a if I can say, an umbrella term that required much more focus from an NHS point of view, and lots of work was done around that during COVID. For me, I think when I started in this role a year ago, as people got to know me and talk to me, I was having conversations with colleagues where anecdotal evidence was being shared with me about things that had been heard, things that had been said to colleagues that were clearly had racist tone to them. So that was something that I was quite shocked about, but also happy to accept was happening in the trust. And I was asked that question in a webinar one day where one of the speakers said, you know, are you comfortable as EDI leads to accept that racism is in your organisation? So it was a broad question to a number of people, and I thought about it and thought, well, at that point I wasn't sure that I was, because I didn't think it was happening within the trust, and then when I started to learn that it was happening in the trust, it saddened me greatly. I think as an organisation as well, we have known that there has been some disproportionate issues with discrimination and bullying of ethnic minority colleagues from our staff survey results. And we've had many campaigns where we've tried to address that. No Excuse for Abuse being one example of a more recent campaign. And then we also I became aware of a junior doctor who'd been racially assaulted in EAU. And unfortunately for that particular individual, there was no support, and that colleague also didn't know where to go to find out what to do when that happened. And as a trust, we felt that we'd let that individual down. So what then happened was Dave Selwyn became aware of that and asked me if I would join a conversation with medical managers around racism within the trust. And that was a fantastic conversation, and there was very clear motivation from everyone in that meeting that it was not acceptable, and there was a real appetite to do something about racism within our organisation. And after the meeting, I sort of thought, how can we take action? because we've talked about this in this forum and it was a really good conversation, but actually there are colleagues who are being harmed by racism or being very frustrated that they're being subjected to it. There are other colleagues who just feel, well, it's part of the job to be abused, or that as a person from an ethnic minority, it's a part of life. And these are real quotes that I've had from colleagues, and I was very sure that in my mind that shouldn't be the case. And it became a bit of an action plan of things that we could do, and that then became a more strategic approach. And I wanted to ensure that there was a very visible, strong, bold, brave message around racism, because I had a sense that sometimes within the NHS we're a bit polite in terms of how we ask people to behave when they're in our hospitals. So I wanted to be quite bold in terms of calling out that abuse for what it is. It's racism, it's a criminal offence, it's not right, it has no place in modern society. So that's how it came about. I hope that answers your question, and thank you for asking it.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so I sort of observed much of that conversation, you know, the Dave Selwyn and medical managers, you know, and I recognise that journey, and as I said earlier, you know, the thing that I really welcomed within the strategy was the sort of tangible actions that people should take, and, you know, really being committed to that.
Yeah.
One further question. I cannot quite see all the flags, but is there a Union Jack on the artwork?
There is. It's just there.
There you go.
Can you see it?
I can see it now. That's great.
And if you go on social media, there's a rather attractive picture of myself pointing to it, because that is, I was born in England. I was born in Kingsmill Hospital, actually, in the old bit, showing my age now, aren't I? But I would encourage everybody as well, because one of the questions that I haven't really addressed, that hasn't been asked, but I'm sure a lot of people are thinking, what does it mean to be anti-racist, and how can I support the anti-racism strategy? So there is there are things in the strategy that will support the anti-racism approach, but this is very much about the organisation is committed to being an anti-racist organisation, and with that it requires some personal commitment from colleagues as well, to look at their behaviours, their beliefs, their values, and just check in to see if they align to an anti-racist approach. And I'm more than happy to have individual conversations or team conversations to support people in what being anti-racist looks like. And I'm sure that there are lots and lots of colleagues who would say I'm not a racist. And certainly I have said that in the past, and I've been very comfortable with that. And I say that because genuinely I'm not a racist person. I don't agree with any stance that has a racist edge to it. But as a society, that's not good enough to not be racist. And what can sometimes happen is when people say, well, I'm not a racist, it actually relieves them of any responsibility to taking action against racism, because I'm not a racist, so it doesn't affect me and I don't behave like that. So it's about just having a think about that, and then taking action in an anti-racist sense, and I can support all colleagues with that. And there will be sessions to come in the future on that, but if people want to have a conversation before or in the near future on that, please get in touch. I'd be delighted to hear from you.
Thanks, Sally, and just two comments. Great work raising awareness. It is unfortunate that we need a strategy and that people cannot treat each other based on their values and actions rather than race, etc. I think as a trust we generally treat each other well, and as a family. Dealing with racism from the public is difficult but essential. Well done, everyone involved. And then a further question, comment. I think some white privilege and anti-racist sessions would be really informational, and I am aware that the Are You Ready to Talk sessions will be starting pretty soon. So I think you know that'll be covered in those, and there'll be more to come to publicise those. Okay. Thank you, Ali. That's been incredibly thought-provoking, helpful, and uplifting, because it really gives us a sense of what we want for our culture here at Sherwood. That we want everyone to feel included and to celebrate the diversity of our workforce, and that's always comes across from you really well. But I think everyone will have heard that today. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just cover off a few questions on more of a more general variety that we've had. This is about COVID vaccination. So are staff able to get the 4th booster, or is this just for the high risk? Is this a further 6 months after the 3rd booster? So as far as I'm aware, the cohorts that the 4th booster will be made available to are in the older age brackets and at high risk. So at the moment, I don't think there are any plans for that to be rolled out to NHS or health and social care staff, but we'll keep you updated as we get that information. Another question, this is about approach when a family member has tested positive for COVID. So if a household family member has tested positive for COVID and I have no symptoms, should I stay away from work or be cautious but still attend work? So the answer there is stay away from work if you have symptoms and if you have tested positive. So I would, if you've got a household member, make sure you're getting tested. Make sure that you are cautious and vigilant, but until you've got a positive test or symptoms, then you are able to attend work. Another question. This is a question about the executive team. With some senior executives leaving the trust, when do we expect to have a full complement again? Well, as you know, we're out to advert for a chief nurse, a chief operating officer, and a director of strategy and partnerships. I am hoping, because the interviews take place over the next 2 to 3 weeks, that in the staff brief immediately before Easter, I'll be able to confirm that we have made positive appointments and be able to confirm some start dates for those individuals. What I am encouraged about, and I'm really confident that we will get excellent candidates, because I've spoken to quite a number of people interested in those roles over the last week or so, and we're getting excellent applications, and that's because we've got something to offer. We've got a good reputation. We focus on patient care, and people want to join this organisation because of the culture in which we work. So more to come. I'll keep people posted on that, and interviews for those 3 posts will take place over the next 3 weeks. Okay, let's draw this to a close. So back to you, Ali. One further comment. I don't think of myself as racist, but I feel ashamed that I haven't spoken up when I have seen or heard racist speech or jokes from peers in the past. This strategy is so important. I think that wow. Encapsulates what you were saying about being anti-racist.
Yeah.
And I think you and we've had conversations before, and I think we both fall into that. That's about when you were describing that you describe yourself as not being racist, but not being anti-racist is something completely different, and that's exactly what this individual has contributed. So thank you
for that contribution.
So thanks again, Ali. I'll draw to a close. Just with a reminder that right now, just starting is Wellbeing Wednesday. We've overrun a little bit, so I'll be quick. And the topic today is healthy weight and healthy eating. And with that, I'll say goodbye. Hope you have a good week and are able to enjoy the good weather we're having at the moment. So thanks to Ali, thanks to everyone who joined. See you soon.